When I was a kid, there was a channel on YouTube I used to watch. It was mostly about comics and other forms of action genre entertainment, but the content creator, who has since removed all of his videos, once made a video in which he discussed loss. He mentioned that he had never lost anyone close to him, but that he could imagine this immense pain that comes along with dealing with this. After reaching my early adulthood, that video has taken on a different meaning. For me, loss is about having something or someone that you loved taken away. The first time it happened, I actually did give some thought to the idea that maybe as time passed, as I met new people, did new things, I would stop having that hole inside of me, but it's still there and just seems to enlarge. I thought about my original relationships with members of my family and some childhood friends, and I noticed how so much changed in such a short number of years. When I was a kid, I had a friend who I went over to the house of almost every weekend for multiple years until I just got sick of having to invite myself over instead of being sought out by him. As an adult, I have a friend who I've known for over 15 years, and while I would call him my best friend without a shadow of a doubt, it is nonetheless difficult to ignore the fact that he isn't as available as that other childhood friend had been. Now, of course, as an adult, I don't expect someone to shower me with attention 24/7, but what I've envisioned is that we can have multiple friends or people that we have close relationships with who, as a group, can give an individual a sense of belonging and wanting, and I just don't have that. I've had a rotation of people who have come in and out of my life in the last several years, and many times, even the ones I generally get along with tend to not be around that often. I have a person I was friends with who lives in another country. He started his own business, and I'm glad that seems to be working out for him. But I noticed that we went from talking several times a week for almost a year to going months and months without so much as a single message between us. I have another person who similarly lives in another country, and I might go months without hearing from them. Even though I like them, it's regrettable that they aren't around as often because it leaves me with less people to talk with who I feel a larger sense of trust with than most of the ones I know in real life. But just to go back to those original relationships, family members that I lived with in the past seemed a lot more interested in me than they are today. I had two relatives I would study with and watch things with, and on the weekends go places with. It was very rare for one of them to go somewhere without me being with them, and oftentimes the only way that was achieved was if I was at school or very ill. I had another relative that I would call every day, ask him how he was doing, and he would notice when he hadn't heard from me in a while, which only happened because he couldn't hear his phone ringing for days. I'm not going to pretend my childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood were perfect, but I always had someone that made me believe they wanted to be around me, wanted to do things with me, and enjoyed my company. Contrast all of this with many of my current real world relationships, and there are a couple of common themes that seem to be reflected not just in acquaintances but also family members. I have family members who I swear if I didn't call them, I would probably never hear or see them again, period. I have family members who you can be in the same room as for hours, and they will stare at their phone or computer or TV as if you're not even there. And these are the same people who will swear they love you, which makes it even more bizarre. I always thought that if I had a son or daughter, I would actually try to do things with them. This could include traveling together, watching things, or helping with school-based activities. It just seems like such a waste to have a person that you claim to like in close proximity for hours on end and barely be willing to say a word to them. In every instance where I have visited or been visited by my best friend, I put my phone down for almost the entire time we speak, usually only turning to it when I want to show him something off of it. What I'm getting at is, I've entered this period where the people who are around me the most seem to be the least interested in actually doing anything with me, and the people who I do think would probably want to do something together simply are not around as much. The thing about romance is that for me, it's always been an abstract concept that I don't really have any first-hand experiences with to believe it's going to be a certain way. So I can admit that I was someone who wanted to meet a woman, get married, have a family, but since I never experienced most of these things, I can only get a sense of what doing those things would be like through watching or hearing from others who have experienced them. In the case of this relative, to have lived your entire life with this person watching over you, there is nothing ambiguous about the change their absence has caused. To have had relatives that did things with or for me and now be surrounded by those who seemingly couldn't care less, I know it doesn't have to be this way. Between 2018 and 2021, there was a concentrated effort on my part to put myself out there. I was going to the mall and various other places of social gatherings very commonly, and I was more active on sites like Discord and Reddit than I had probably ever been in the past. I would say the most notable relationship to come out of that period was the one I had with Triple L, a woman I spoke to online for almost 11 months on or off. What was really frustrating about her is that she continued a pattern I've always hated, where you'll have some woman who, although she insists that you're just friends, she nonetheless talks to you in what I call coded language. So we had one exchange where she said something to the effect of, for our friendship, our possible relationship, and really with her, what you had was a woman who correctly suspected that I have had some romantic feelings for her, and she was not reciprocating but still wanted me to talk to her for whatever reason. So she would occasionally play into the idea that this might turn into something more than just talking on the phone, when it never will. 11 months of it not going anywhere led to me severing ties, as we had a pretty heated call where I directly asked her if she would go on a date, and after much deliberation, done on purpose to make it seem like she was really thinking about it, she finally said no. One of the more frustrating things in hindsight about Triple L was that our exchanges really were the last time I tried to be friends, quote unquote, with a woman I was attracted to, and shunned what I called the friend zone. With characters I met later, like Miss Revolving Door, who I discussed in the Banana Penalty, or the coworker that we're going to get into, it was the reverse, where I would have been completely satisfied just being friends because I wasn't attracted to either of them. In the case of Miss Revolving Door, I never even saw what she looked like. There's something ironic about wanting to be more than friends with a woman who, to her credit, seemed at various points to want to speak to me, albeit platonically. And then when you're fine with just being friends with a woman, they either create circumstances or go out of their way to torpedo any attempts to further your correspondence with them. The one saving grace of that period was, even though I had this big loss that left me with an unfillable void, it was just one. 4 years later, the same thing started happening again. Two of my closest relatives, both of whom I tended to see or hear from every day, died 11 months apart, and that was when it really set in that nothing had been gained in this time, but everything had been lost. And then we move over to the subject of the job. I was so excited when I got hired somewhere after looking for work for almost a year. Now, anyone who saw the Triangle scam knows that I initially paid $100 a month to stay where I am, and after this crazy relative tried changing it to $500 a month while I was unemployed, in some misguided attempt to get me to get a job, we settled on $300. So after over half a year of me paying almost $1,000 every 3 months without having any income, I get hired, and within less than 2 months, I have to start paying $600 to $700 a month for the mortgage on a house, in addition to paying $300 just to stay where I am, and for whatever other expenses I have for essential goods like food and gas. So for the last 4 months, since January, I've been paying anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200 altogether on the salary of a part-time employee. I looked at my bank account 2 weeks ago, and I just felt this immense frustration and a sense of doom as I had a realization I had more money when I didn't have a job than after getting one. I've had this job since November, and there is yet to be one day where I have called out sick, where I've declined coming to work, and it's becoming increasingly common for me to pick up the shifts of coworkers. What I'm conveying is that to work for 5 months and have less money than you did when you started is a confirmation that I work for nothing. And it's not the job's fault, but rather a series of factors coming together to bring about my demise. Again, back when I first started working there, I thought this was a sign that things were going to get better. I always vaguely allude to my relatives, and I'm honest in telling you that most of the living ones are worthless. I remember back in 2018 when I was accepted by a university out of state, which charges more than schools in my home state of California, and these relatives complained about how costly it was. And even back then, I could completely understand where $12,000 was a large amount of money, even though my idea was for them to split it, which would make it $6,000 or even less per person, which is around the rate of some of the universities out here. However, I now live in an era where you can't get these people to help you with buying food that ranges anywhere from $2 to $10, gas that is usually somewhere between $20 to $40, and any other utility needed for your survival. So it's not hard to see where I would arrive at the belief that in spite of all their rhetoric, they don't care about me. One time when I was talking with my friend, I told him how disturbing it was that even though I'm a small channel, I get more money from my subscribers than my own parents. 2 years ago, I wasn't worried about running out of money or if I don't pay this every month, I'm going to get kicked out, etc. The relatives that actually did something for me are gone, and the crappy ones that copy much of the same rhetoric are unwilling to mimic their actions. I had a conversation in January with a coworker who accused me of being a glass half empty person, and his elaboration of this was to say that I'm someone who doesn't acknowledge the positive parts of their life. But my thing is, what's so wrong about admitting you're not where you want to be? Like, I have projects that I wish were further along, and I lament the fact I often don't have the time or devotion to them that I would like to have. I still try, though. I don't like being a part-time employee and hate the prospect of having to get 2 to 3 jobs to possibly have the chance of finally being able to live alone. I still try, though. It was in that conversation with this coworker that we had an exchange about a woman who worked with us, who I had been friendly with, and his suspicion that I wanted to date her. I was affirmative that I did not, but I thought, what's the harm in asking her if she wants to hang out? At worst, she would just say no, right? And it's not like I haven't heard that word before, time and time again. But she accepted, and that led into this 2-month saga of renewals, betrays, lies, and yet another waste of time. I previously addressed her in the train wreck of trying to be friends with a woman video, but that was before I knew she reported me. I think it's safe to say that out of any woman I've talked to in the last 6 years, whether they be online or someone I met in real life, she has come the closest to breaking my heart. This was accomplished by the fact that I just wanted to be friends, which seemed a much more attainable goal than trying to date. And in having that smaller goal, I let my guard down. I extended myself in ways I normally do not, and although she at first appeared receptive to this, it was just another cruel joke. Not only was I stood up at the last minute, not only was I ignored for 2 weeks in spite of her being the one that messed up our rendezvous, not only was I led on for multiple weeks that she still wanted to hang out with me, but just was suddenly always busy, not only was I reported by her for supposedly making her uncomfortable, in spite of the fact that she was on video coming up to me, and who the hell would actively seek out sitting next to someone that's apparently bothering them. All of this was initiated by me asking her if she wanted to go see a movie. I was wondering why I've been thinking about her so much. It's not like we were close friends, and after all, she barely responded when I would write to her. In the past, I've had coworkers that I liked to some extent or another, and I didn't go home and just think about that person as much as I have with her. I brought up how easy it was in the past for me to be around those that seem to enjoy my company. This is the first time in that 6-year period of just constant losses that I've really, at least with a person in real life, tried to connect with someone in an overt way. I don't believe anyone who has never met me knows me better than myself, which is why those that analyze my personality online tend to get ignored. However, I think in the absence of people that I could just spend time with pretty much whenever I wanted, or very often, it's caused me to be more desperate for the appearance of friendship and more willing to put up with things I otherwise would have had no patience for. I also think that in agreeing to see a movie with me, she created an expectation that she ultimately did not deliver on, which makes it even more frustrating than if she had just said no, because it gives the appearance of almost getting what you want before it's yanked away. It's like dangling keys in front of someone's face with the promise that they'll be allowed to drive the car and then pulling them back when they go to reach for them. When I wrote the script for the train wreck of trying to be friends with a woman, the video was released a few days after a very notable encounter we had. I was sitting outside reading a book, waiting for traffic to die down. She, on a break, approached me and sat close to me as she began staring at her phone, which she does for the entire time we speak. I confronted her over some things like her inability to respond to a text message or commit to a day for us to hang out, and toward the end I told her that I didn't know why she was pushing me away, but that I wasn't stupid and I wasn't going to send her any more messages. After about 7 minutes, she throws her hands up and asks, "Okay, are you going to keep going at this?" before walking away. I assumed that after this exchange, we were done, and the most that would happen would be us not speaking again, which had already happened once before. By chance, the same day that I put up the train wreck video, I get a call from the human resources department of my job, and they told me that an anonymous employee claimed that they believed I was recording them this past Sunday and it made them uncomfortable. I instantly knew it was her, told the lady that I spoke with that there was no recording, that she had approached me as I sat outside, that this was a consensual relationship between two adults, and that I believed her report was her trying to get back at me for the exchange we had on Sunday, which ended badly. Now, my arguments, along with the fact that the woman was recorded coming up to me, convinced the lady that called to not pursue investigating the matter, and I faced no actual repercussions as a result. I've asked this question before. How do you, in a span of 24 hours, go from seeking someone to sit with them to trying to get them fired by reporting them? I can't imagine how much animosity you must have towards someone to experience such a rapid change in how you feel toward them. Someone else proposed the theory that she never liked me that much to begin with, which I can believe, although it makes her smiling and accepting my request to go see a movie all the more bizarre in hindsight. Because she was lightly teased, this included me making fun of some of her catchphrases, and confronted over how flaky she had been, she decided to get back at me by saying that I made her uncomfortable because she thought she was being recorded. I tried to directly address her report with her, but she preferred to stare at her phone and asked if we could drop it. She claimed that we were quote-unquote good, and I greeted her over the next few weeks when I saw her, although I noticed that she would sit away from me from then on and only speak when spoken to. I'm going to tell you the day where we reached the point of no return, March 23rd. That day, I was not expecting her to be working, but I had devised that I would ask her about possibly doing some voice work for me as a means of having at least something good come out of this. She made a big mess by spilling something, and one of our coworkers, who I have always gotten along with and found to be helpful, was assisting her in cleaning it. Now, as I'm walking past the pair, he says to her, "I'll pick you up at 8. She replies, "Okay." My heart drops to my stomach because 1, she has a car, and 2, this is the same woman that spent over a month dodging doing anything with me outside of there, but here she is readily agreeing to jump in the back of another man's vehicle. Later on, as our breaks were concurrent with each other, I approach a table she is sitting at and ask her if I can sit with her. I always have done this as a formality, and she has always consented to me sitting by her. This time, she looks up at me with a grin and says, "I'm watching a video." I pulled the chair back in and walked away. We got off at the same time after midnight, and as I got in my car, I damn near had tears in my eyes because I was frustrated with her and myself. I was frustrated with her for seeming to like me only to start pushing me away, doing something that could have been very damaging to me with her report that she never apologized for making or showed any remorse over attempting, and all the lies. But I was angry with myself for having trusted her, for having developed this desire to so strongly want to be friends with her that I would tolerate almost anything, and for putting myself in the situation to allow one of these moralist plagues to get so close to my heart just to put a knife through it. You know, I've always pushed back on the idea that there was something wrong with me. So you'll have internet psychologists who will try to diagnose a person they never met with some mental disorder, but honestly, after dealing with her, I'm inclined to agree with them. I must have Stockholm Syndrome to have put up with the abuse, mistreatment, and lies of my coworker for 2 months. 2 months of trying to just go see a movie with someone. 2 months of trying to just hang out with someone. And after 2 months of renewals, betrayals, and lies, I am left with nothing. You could have deleted every single interaction between when I first asked her to go see a movie at the end of January and the events of March 23rd, and the only thing that would be different is that I would have one less coworker who treats me badly. Nothing was gained. And in the time since, as she's had no problem walking past me like I don't exist, I can't help but think of our past interactions where she would smile at me and ask me how I was doing and what kind of things I like to do, and draw an all too familiar realization. I was nothing to her. I am nothing to her. I will always be nothing to women, whether I talk to one of them for 10 days or 10 years. I know that as bad as I felt during those 2 weeks when we didn't speak the first time, she could work with me for another several months or even years and never once apologized for anything she did to me, whether that was sending me up at the last minute, leading me on with non-committals, trying to have me destroyed, or acting like I was some pest. Now on the internet, it's easier to be nasty than it is in person. Oftentimes a random person will spawn on my channel and without directly responding to anything I'm actually saying, communicate how they're so much more adept at picking up social cues or insult me in some other way. But this is different. This is a person I know in real life, who I can look in the eyes of, I can touch, and who I believe has wronged me. I'm not used to having people in real life treat me this badly, and I'm about to utter what may be the most important part of this video. When I did the train wreck of trying to be friends with a woman video, the script was written and the video was released before I knew she reported me. There were a series of dumb comments left on the video, and it was the usual antagonistic affair of not being able to address any of the points I make and just personal insults lobbied toward me. I've never claimed to care about random men, but I'm also not malevolent enough to want to see this happen to anyone else, so listen carefully. If you are a male, never allow yourself to believe that a woman cares about you just because she smiles at you, asks you personal questions about yourself, calls you a friend, or even agrees to do something unique to just the two of you, like hanging out or having some phone calls. And if you don't want to talk to women, either online or in real life, for the purpose of having some relationship with one of them, don't let any of these triangle worshipping, tunnel vision, fake concern, argument deprived, la la land lunatics convince you that you're wrong for wanting to protect yourself from the toxic, terrible, train wreck inducing plague that is the modern woman. They will literally lead you off a cliff. Do you think if I'd been fired, that waste of oxygen would have reached out to me to see if I was okay or apologize for not knowing her report would go that far? Do you think if I'd been fired and had no income, she would have felt guilty about ruining my livelihood and tried to help me get another job or do any damn thing to support me? Do you think if I'd been fired, she would have thought about me for 1 second with any semblance of humanity, concern, or regret? She would have done none of these things because these stupid sacks of trash don't care about men, including the ones they claim to like. People so often talk about how someone needs to get over something, but whether you believe I have or not, there are consequences to the things we do and have done to us. The consequence of those relatives not being around anymore are numerous and include the lack of support or want that I have felt in their absence. The consequence of Miss Revolving Door was that I don't want to get involved in trying to be friends with a woman online again. The consequence of my coworker was that I don't want to get involved in trying to be friends with women, period. Right now, I have 2 female coworkers that I like speaking to when we're around each other, but I wouldn't dream of asking them for their phone number or trying to hang out with them because who's to say history doesn't repeat itself and another one of them tries to throw me off a bridge or have me murdered. This all began back in 2017 when one of the few people I ever loved died, and I entered that initial period of having this never-ending void that only seemed to get larger over the last few years with more deaths. It just doesn't seem like anything is being gained. In all of my days since, I have thought about that day in 2017. That's when everything started crumbling, leaving nothing.